Hello everyone, my name is Scott, and this is my first Let's Play of Kerbal Space Program. Now, this is also my first attempt at video editing and my first Let's Play in general. So let's see how we go from here. Now, tentatively, I've called my space program the Long-Term Space Program, because I really didn't have any ideas as what else to call it. So, I'm just going to start my game here and push the button, and we're going to get going. So let's get started here. I've got the Kerbal Space Center, and from here I'm going to be launching my first vehicle. The point of this video is I'm going to be putting a space station into space that's going to be basically there to refill all of my vehicles. Now, I've pre-built all these vehicles before I started the video just because I wanted to get into the launching and the maneuvering, because I spend a lot of time engineering these things. I take a great deal of effort, and it'd be really hard to put all that into my first video. So this vehicle is basically just to launch a gas can into space with as much gas as possible. I am using a mod called KW Rocketry, which allows for the extra large cans and the really big boosters on the inner stages. And I'm just gonna launch this sucker here. Okay, so we're about to launch. Just throttle up, the space bar there. Now, this is definitely going to be one of the more interesting vehicles I've launched, because it is so heavy and I'm dealing with so much force that it gets very jittery while it's going up there, and you can see it start to shimmy and shake and rock. And I've got this accelerated at 2 times speed just to kind of speed up the process a bit so you guys can get an idea. But of all the vehicles you're going to see are the ones that I've worked on recently, this has definitely been one of the more challenging ones, because the shaking in it got so violent at one point that the bottom RCS tanks would actually just fall off when I was changing stages. It just drove me nuts. In any case, I mean, the KW Rocketry mod gives me also these boosters that I have about 3,800 thrust, generating a lot of force through the thing, and it's just launching anything big is tricky to say the least in this game. As you can see now, I fired my center booster. Now I've got way more thrust to weight ratio than I need, but that center booster actually helps to alleviate the shockwave on the system whenever the main booster's cut off. Because if you'll notice, when I'm accelerating and decelerating here, I never hit the X just to cut throttle. It's because on this particular vehicle, that would actually cause damage to go from a full burn to a sudden stop, blow itself to pieces. It's actually quite amusing. You've also noticed I've got some Sepatrons on the top of that. That's because the previous stage had trouble running into the main vehicle when I'd separate them. There wasn't enough force, so I actually had to put a little more oomph into them just to kick them away, and it still gets kind of close, but I've never actually run into the main vehicle this time, so it's kind of cool. So I'm going up here, and I'm actually going to try to get this into a stable orbit approximately around 90 kilometers off of Kerbin. Get up to about 95 just to give me some wiggle room here, and I'm going to start transferring fuel back into the main stages. Just to get rid of that little bit extra gas. From here, I'm going to jettison the cans and watch them spin. Got close to my engine there, but it didn't hold. Now, I'm going to immediately start my circularization burn, simply because I don't have a lot of thrust to weight ratio right now with just this engine. I believe this is only the skipper engine with about 650 thrust. Gives me a thrust to weight ratio somewhere around 0.6. with the full tank. So I have got to get this thing centralized, or circularized, excuse me, as fast as possible, and I've got a very short window to do it. As you can see, my time to apoapsy is like less than a minute right now. So I'm just flying this manually, just tweaking it, trying to keep the apoapsy at the same height and raise my periaps. It is a big can of gas, and even with the SAS on, it still wants to twist and turn a little bit. So I'm just doing some minor alterations trying to keep it going. You might have also noticed in the design here that I've got 2 pro bodies on it. I've got one on the bottom with the main engine, with the orange engine, and one on the top with an RCS tank. That's because I generally don't like Kessler syndrome, which is, for those of you that might not be aware, Kessler syndrome is a phenomenon where a spacefaring race leaves a whole bunch of junk in their orbit, and as it gets built up, you start to get a lot of debris around your planet. That debris can cause all kinds of problems for, spacefaring and whatnot, collisions and issues. It's great in some situations in science fiction and all that, but I personally don't want my Kerbal space covered in crap, so I'm just going to deorbit. I leave enough to deorbit my space junk once it's ready to come off. And there we go. We just hit 30,000 kilometers on my periaps. I'm burning a little more towards the higher end of the horizon there, just to make sure my op-ops doesn't get too high, but I'm getting to the point where here I'm just going to stop it. And I've got a stable orbit now at about 83 kilometers on the periaps side. So what I'm going to do is, I got no batteries on this because, again, I tried to keep it as light as possible, which is kind of difficult when you need more parts. So it's just got lights and solar panels and gas. It's got a lot of gas. I'm quite happy with the amount of gas I ended up with, because now I can fill a lot of vehicles up before I need to refill it. And again, the part of the reason I designed my space station with one huge tank as opposed to several smaller tanks, which would have been easier to launch, is to keep the part count down. I've seen a lot of space stations that people have built where they get these wonderfully big space stations, highly complex, awesome things, but they get a lot of physics lag, and I'm trying to avoid that a bit. Now, I'm just going to head up to my apoaps here, and I'm actually going to use the RCS to reduce, or excuse me, not my apoaps, my periaps, and I'm going to use the RCS to just thrust backwards here to bring my apoaps down a bit. Now, I'm actually fighting time here, because as soon as that sun goes behind the horizon, I no longer have juice. The only juice that's being held is by the probe bodies themselves. So if you look in the top corner, you can see I don't have much. So I'm like, burn as much RCS as I can, rather than rotate the thing around, just to get this stable and get it closer to where I originally wanted it. And I ended up getting right around 90 kilometers above ground before I run out of electricity. Which is fine. The lights just die and it can continue. So that's good enough. So the next vehicle I'm going to launch is going to be the next piece of this. Okay, so back at Kerbal Space Center here, I'm going to launch the next piece of my space station, which is the docking collar. Much easier to get off the ground, considerably lighter. I designed it again with part count in mind, to try to keep it somewhat low, but yet still functional. Couple of crew containers and a few parts from a mod called Modular Girder System, which provides bigger girders, which is useful, as well as a deep space mission pack. Alright, so let's get going here. Again, this one was so much simpler to get into space than the gas can. Man, that thing sucked on so many levels trying to get something that worked. But I finally did, and now we're finally going on here. Now, we're just going to wait for the gas can to come around and get a little closer to the Kerbal Space Center so that I can launch it and get relatively close without a whole bunch of corrective burns. And here we go. Alright, so now we're just going up here, and I use the standard asparagus staging, which is just dropping the tanks as they empty. There's lots of tutorials on the internet that would teach you how to do that, or show you basically how to do that. If you want me to do it, just ask. I'll see what I can do for you. This was an interesting launch because it's a rather long piece of equipment, and as a result the weight is really on both ends of the docking collar, even though it doesn't really look it. When you go to do your turn here, when we get about 10 kilometers off the ground to get to the 90-degree angle, you got to kind of be careful with this one, because it had a tendency to want to wiggle and wobble, and it was very easy to oversteer. Thus putting your nose facing back into the ground and wasting precious fuel to try to push back into the gravity well. Not a good thing. Anyway, drop the last stage and continue going. Again, I've got some parts on this one with KW rocketry as well. The upper stage, which you'll see me drop in a minute, is actually mostly deep space mission pack. And I just flicked on the lights here because I kind of like being able to see what I'm doing. The docking collar also has a couple of generators built into it, so it doesn't actually need the solar panels, and I can keep the lights on indefinitely. I tell you, Jeb's face cracks me up every time I see it. He's awesome. I love the humor of this game. I mean, the space physics and the launching is fun. Being an engineer is great, but I think what sold me the most is just the goofy Kerbal attitude, where they're basically just rated on courage and stupidity, and that smile of Jeb's always makes me grin. So now we're on to our final stage. Just love that last stage coming off, because I blasted it off to it with high throttle. It shot it back like a spit in a watermelon seed. It was great. Again, I did sort of early circularization burns, just to make sure I did it. This vehicle didn't need so much, and it probably would have been more efficient to wait until I got a little closer to the apoaps. But at the same time, I'm just like, the sooner I can circularize it, the better. So while we're circularizing here, I'm just going to tell you a bit more about myself. My name is Scott. There is another famous Scott that's a very big Kerbal enthusiast. I am not him, just so that we make sure that's aware. I have been watching Scott Manley's videos for a great deal now, and he's actually done a really great job. So you might notice I take a few cues from him, but that's just because it helps speed up the whole process here. Now, I'm just going to correct the burn here a little bit when I get to the apoaps. So now I'm just going to do a couple of inclination adjustments just to make sure we get everything nice and even with the gas can. From there, I just got to get my periapsis up a little bit so that it's not going into the ground, because right now I'm on a degrading orbit and it will go back into the atmosphere and not come back out. That's spectacular for crashing, but at this point I'm not deorbiting anything. I'm looking to build, I'm not looking to destroy. Anyway, while we're waiting for me to finish these orbiting maneuvers, I'm just going to give you a little bit more again about my personal background. I'm a programmer. I've also worked in game technology a bit. My primary experience has been with the Unreal Engine. However, I have dabbled a little bit in a few other smaller engines. I've looked at Unity, haven't used it yet, but I'm still debating it. Looks like a good little engine because this game was built upon it. I'm actually quite impressed by how well it works as well. So we're nearly done getting the space dock here going. I'm going to be going back to Kerbal Space Center here to get the space tug. This vehicle I designed to basically be the workhorse. It's going to grab objects in space, it's going to move them around, it's basically going to assemble my space stations as well, and once the space station is complete, it's going to hang out there. Okay, so this thing's ready to go, let's launch it. Now I'm just going to cut a little footage away from here while I'm waiting for the space debris to come around to the Kerbal Space Center. Again, just to prevent unnecessary orbital maneuvers. I'm using air-breathing engines for this one, as you might have picked out. They're incredibly fuel efficient as compared to just about every other type of engine. The only downside is you got to watch your air intakes. This one I designed so that by the time I get to the point where I would lose all my air intake, all stages are dropped anyway. Alright, this is actually a bit of a dusk launch, so I've turned the lights on a little bit early. You also may notice a couple of features on the actual craft itself. First one is the arrow spikes that are facing in a retro vector, which basically means they are braking. I use them for braking. They have a higher thrust to weight ratio than the nuclear engines, but the nuclear engines are considerably more efficient. So I only use the arrow ones for when I'm braking, and they actually come in extremely handy when you're moving around fairly heavy loads in space, not having to sift them around, especially if your RCS is not centerized on the center of mass when you're tugging around something big. You'll see that later. The other feature I really like is this robotic arm that's sticking off the cockpit, as well as the B9 cockpit from B9 Aerospace, which is really useful. But the arm is the Buran arm. It comes from the Robot Arms pack, a pack that I really enjoy using. I will get more into what it's used for, but basically the best feature about it is you can pretty much use it to dock to anything, even if it doesn't have a docking port. It's got a magnetic tip on it, and I was going to include it just in case I needed to deorbit space junk for some reason, or I had to capture something that was out of gas without a docking port. Anyway, we're just getting back out into space, and this is considerably easier with this vehicle because it's fairly light. Now I'm about to drop this stage here, and I'm going to have to do a very long burn with these nuclear engines to get it circularized, like basically immediately. As you can see here, I'm just using the nav ball on the bottom there to try to find the point where my apoapsis is going up and doing a full burn. Now this one gets a little scary because these nuclear thrusters are great once you break a gravity well, but if they're in a pretty heavy gravity well like you'd find in Kerbin, they don't seem to really do it, and you'll see that I'm going to burn for quite a ways here. So Bill's just spinning the vehicle right now, trying to make Nukov sick, I assume just to make sure all that training he took at the Kerbal Space Center is worth all the Kerbal dollar things that they invest in these guys. In any case, I'm just again kind of taking a look at the map here just to make sure I am close to my targets, and I kind of split them well, which is good here. Now I'm just burning here to get it circularized. I can see a flaw in my design as I was coming up here, and I see the space port or the docking port on the back is actually upside down in comparison to the cab. This could create a problem. I also decided I was going to use some thrust from RCS to try to augment my nuclear engines, because I was sweating a little bit here. I wasn't sure if I was going to make it. You can actually see me when I start to burn. I'm going to start climbing on the nav ball and going higher and higher, and I get past 90 degrees at one point, going straight up from in relation to kerbin, just in order to make my make a safe orbit. Just pulling her up there a little bit at a time, trying not to. Bill's just like, yeah, don't sweat it, I got this. He's like, I got this. Yeah, and the other guy's just like, whatever. So just working that joystick a little bit, or whatever they're using to actually climb, but as you can see, I'm getting higher and higher. I am getting close to getting my periapsy out of the negative, which is reassuring, and then I actually get it out, and at about 25 clicks, the camera shifts, which is an indication to me that I'm probably okay. So I get her up there, gonna match orbits with my space dock. I was gonna go for that one first. There we go, safe orbit, more or less. Get her sort of set up here. Gonna move the Buran arm into its position where I'm gonna keep it, so that it's not sticking way out the front of me here. I'm just gonna park it so that when I'm moving around here, it's not gonna be too much of something to catch on things as I'm going by, because that would be bad. I don't need to catch and rip pieces off. Again, this thing's got a nice little nose camera on the end of the arm, which again is very useful when you're trying to capture something with it. So from here, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit to when I matched orbits with my space dock. There's lots of tutorials again for this particular section of it, but basically the short version is if you need to catch something that's ahead of you, you want a lower orbit. If you catch something that's higher than you want a higher orbit. Again, if you want more tutorials, just ask me. Now, I kind of made a boo-boo and forgot to deploy my solar panels, so my space tug ran out of juice while I was trying to make some maneuvers, and I couldn't figure out quite why until I got her going again. Then I just basically had to match my vehicle's vector with where my target was, match speed with it first of all. Now, this thing is torquey. I mean, it wants to turn on its own, which is okay. I mean, I built some rotary wheels into the back of it, and it's got a lot of RCS. It's supposed to turn very quick, and it's also a very light vehicle, especially if it's got low fuel. I was kind of thought about here playing with MechJab and making docking to do the docking for me, because it can be tricky sometimes. Now I'm just basically getting ready to slow down my approach vector to the space dock, and I was rotating a bit to try to get a little more sun on my solar panels, but I don't think it really did much. In any case, I'm getting juice back. I'm able to maneuver again. Life is good. So now again, I'm just getting ready to do my maneuvers. As I get closer to the station, I want to be ready to burn my engines to kill my velocity. You don't want to be coming into that too fast, or you could damage your space station. It's kind of obvious. When I got to below about 2 kilometers, I got to the point where I was going to do it. Now, I'm not using my Aerospike retro thrusters, because on this small of a ship, it's not really necessary. It twists and turns well. But when I start to haul the space dock around, you'll see me using them a fair bit. Now I'm just killing my velocity with regards to my target. Again, there's lots of tutorials on docking and capturing things. If you really want me to go into it, maybe mention it. Otherwise, maybe I'll just point out some good ones for you. Alright, so now I'm just going to approach the space dock again. This time I'm only using RCS thrust because I don't want to get going too fast. Just again to be sure. Safely and kind of tweaking it and then torquing it. And it wants to torque around a fair bit. That's okay. But I did run into the flaw that I mentioned earlier. If you notice when I said my space dock was upside down, that plays a major role that when I was capturing this dock, and it kind of became a little of a nuisance. I might correct that flaw in the next generation of this craft and decommission this one at some point because of it, because it actually is a bit of a nuisance. Basically, when I go to dock with the space dock here, you'll see that shortly. When I go to make my dock here, basically, because the docking port on the back of my ship is inverted, it inverts my controls. And you're going to see me that when I actually go to target the dock here, when I get to about 200 meters from it, that I start looking like I'm going a little spastic. And that's because every button I'm pushing is doing something counterintuitive to what I expect it to do. It took me a minute to get my head wrapped around that. I eventually got the thing under control, and like I said, I'll probably fix that design at some point here. In any case, we're getting closer, a little closer. Again, I'm just tweaking my approach vector as I can to make sure I come in close without actually coming in on a dangerous velocity. I'm only doing about 1.3 meters a second at this point. I tend to like to take it easy. So I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit here, because basically all I'm doing is just corrective burns and slight vector adjustments with my RCS. Alright, so we get to the space dock. I can see it and I can target it now. I turn on the docking autopilot from MechJeb, and it just kind of goes crazy on me. So I decided to not use it. It kind of started spinning and doing some weird stuff, and I really wasn't sure why. It kind of got into this weird spin. So anyways, I'll turn it off here in a second. I'm just like, screw it. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it myself. Maybe that'll get me some more space cred with the Kerbal community. Anyways, if you're noticing the little docking alignment indicator on the right-hand side of my screen there, that's actually a mod called the Docking Port Alignment Indicator. There's a lot of tutorials on how to use that too. It's got one specifically on the site. I'm kind of wiggling around because, like I said, I just switched to my rear docking port, and because it's upside down, my controls are a little counterintuitive. But I eventually get it wrangled in. So with the docking alignment, you basically want to get all the crosshairs lined up with the white crosshairs in the middle and then you're basically got to set up for a perfect docking port alignment. As you can see here, you get the orange one because the orange one is the orientation of your docking port with regards to your target docking port. The yellow one is your velocity vector. When you're backing onto your docking port, you want that on the center as well, but when you're actually getting adjustments, you want to move the yellow indicator towards the green lines, because that actually causes you to move and close the distance. Now the green lines also indicate a distance from where your docking port is with relation to your target. So basically, just get her all squared up and centered on the white crosshairs in the middle, and it'll be pretty much a close perfect mating. Coming in slowly, getting a little impatient, so I'm tweaking it and tweaking it. Moving slowly, just burning a little RCS. Now, I came in on the night side for this dock, which is fine. That's why I put lights on everything. Now, I'm just rotating to alignment because I don't want my engines burning straight into my crew cabins on the dock. And again, some micro adjustments, getting everything lined up well. Just tweaking it, playing with it, you know, just playing with it. So we're just going to come in here now. I'm going to leave this one at standard speed for this. I've actually still got it going at 2x speed as to what I was doing, so it looks a little faster than it really is. I thought about speeding this section up, but just in case people want to see, you know, how to do this docking maneuver or see how the docking alignment works a little bit better, I figured I'd just let it go. So we're just, again, making adjustments, and it's grateful that I got lights on the thing so I can kind of see what's going on in my rear end. Just moving it. I've got the one line. There we go. Turn on some light so I can see a little better. I'm kind of a stickler for light. Makes things easier to see, obviously. The other thing is, though, that sometimes the lighting in this game doesn't work quite right, so it gets a little wonky, or lights that should be casting aren't. I'm not sure why that is, but in any case, get back to the docking here, just lining up, getting her. Come on, come on, just a bit more. Come on. Alrighty, we're almost there. There, that looks pretty close to a perfect alignment, so I just gotta push her back and grab the sucker. And just get those nice big docking port seniors connected together, nice stable connection. Just playing with the rotation, just a hair, just so that when I do dock, it is as balanced as possible and prevents strange maneuvers from happening. Alright, there we go. Looks like I got the rotation just right. Or close. I'm coming in pretty quick, but I do pull it off. I get a little scared at the last second and do a little bit of correction, stop, and readjust slightly before I came in. But Anyway, let's do a quick puff of RCS, and we are about to connect. Connect. Come on, connect. There's the magnet. There we go. Kabang. We have connection. Awesome. So now that we've got a connection, I'm just going to start moving a little bit of fuel around here. I got a little bit of gas left in the stage that brought the docking port up. And take most of that out of there. I think I'll leave just a hair, or it just worked out, so I had just a hair of fuel to deorbit. Worked out just fine. I figured, well, let's take the monoprop too while I'm at it. It doesn't need to burn all that monoprop. I can always use it. Now, I kind of made a boo-boo. I left one tank of monoprop, and that made the canister a little off balance. So, as you can see here, it does a kind of an interesting deorbiting maneuver. So I decouple the node and try to do the cockpit control from here, but that doesn't seem to work like it used to in Kerbal 2.0. Alright, so we're clear of the docking port. Time to deorbit this junk. Just got to switch from the orbit here to find out where my retrograde vector is. And burn. Got to do this quickly because I only have so much juice in the thing. Now I kind of burnt and then went on a weird spin, but anyways, it's gonna deorbit. And I'm gonna do the same for this end. Basically, it's just a monopropellant tank with some RCS thrusters and a probe body. Again, leave just a little bit of monoprop in there so that I can safely get it out of orbit. I don't like junk. Alright, decoupled. And switch me to that, and then I go to this. Now, I just gotta turn this sucker around. Find where the retrograde vector is. I gotta do it quick because I'm losing juice, and if I run out of juice, I can't do any maneuvers. Alright, flying her down. Just checking it quickly. And on the night side with nothing but RCS, which is all you can see. Kinda cool. So we're just moving forward. I've got very little monoprop left, so as soon as that runs out, I'll just switch back to the docking station and we'll go from there. So I just skipped ahead a little bit here. Again, I was matching orbits with the gas cannon space so we could put the dock together, and now I'm getting close to it to do some corrective burns to align the orbits perfectly. As you can see, I'm about 14 clicks away from the current gas can. I had to do a little bit of like one more orbit around the planet in order to get it to the point where I could actually close the distance, which is actually pretty good. I got lucky. I managed to guess close enough to keep the gas can and the docking collar and the tug close enough that I didn't have to do a whole bunch of orbits to capture them, which made me really happy. So again, we're just closing the distance. You're going to see me start to use my retrograde thrusters, my aero spikes that I put on the front right away, and this is where they come in real handy. Still haven't used the aerospikes. I'm just correcting my approach vector. As you can see, you can burn on the far side to try to maneuver the yellow node back toward the target. Okay, here I go. Now I'm actually just killing my velocity using the retrograde thrusters. I actually bound them to an action group, and then as you can see, I switch them back and forth as I need them. It actually makes for quick correction burns, and if you're using large, low payloads on your vehicles, can be very handy. I got another design that's going to use that retrograde idea, but I'm not going to show you guys until a later video when I actually need the vehicle as it was designed to do. So for the next few minutes here, I'm just going to be doing corrective burns and adjusting my approach vector just to match it up with the gas can. You may have noticed that on some of my designs there's an MK1 or an MK2 or an MK3, and that's just because I tend to save my first design, and if there's some major design flaw in it or some big problem with it, but I still like it or it's still usable, I'll actually just create another version. I don't know if everyone noticed, but if some of you did, I did have the kethane mod installed on this Kerbal Space Program. I do intend to harvest and gather it off of the moon and off of Minmus and various other planets that I go to. In any case, we will see more of that in a later video. So now I'm at the gas can. I've got to make a docking port clear basically because I've got stuff on both ends to try to help make it a little bit more controllable. So now I'm just deorbiting that, and now I've got a docking port in the end. I just retract my panels because less danger of me smoking one of them by accident. Again, we're using the docking port alignment, and again, this is all me. There's no mech jeb in this one. But as you notice, my vehicle seems to control a lot easier for this dock, and that's simply because with a big weight on the end, the tug actually does what it's supposed to. And we just close that distance, coming in pretty good. For this one, I also sped up the footage a fair bit. I think I'm going at 4 times this time around, just because I don't want this video to drag on too much longer than it has to. Again, using the docking alignment, we're going to come in carefully. This is actually a hell of a lot faster than I did it. But it still came in the same thing. It was coming in nice and smooth, relatively straight. The weight was balanced such that it really wanted to go on properly the first time. I had to tweak the rotation slightly, but not much. I actually thought I bonked the station right there, but I think I just put too much thrust to slow me down, and it actually pulled me away a bit. Anyway, we're coming in carefully. We're just going to align the station with the solar sails. Get her to come in nice and carefully, just finishing her off quickly. And we will have contact momentarily. When you hear the crunch, you're there. Bang. Alright, so that's it. We got the 2 big pieces of my space station together. I'm just going to deorbit this rocket engine. I put a tiny bit of fuel in it, just tweaking it just slightly. Get her out of the way. And again, just decouple and get my orbit up so that I can see where my retrovector is. Now, I don't want to do it right there because I don't want to crash this into the thing, but fire, boom, gone. It's going to go into the Ep1. And we have it. Well, thanks everyone. This has been my first attempt at Kerbal Space Program in a Let's Play. I hope to do more of these as we go. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, let me know. I'll put my mods into the comments as well. This is Scott Cook saying, see you in the verse, have a great time, and take care. Talk to you later. Goodbye.